The wagon's wheel struck the rock with a sickening crack, sending Eliza Whitfield tumbling through the air as her world literally turned upside down. The year was 1876, and what had begun as a hopeful journey west had transformed in an instant into a nightmare of splintered wood, scattered supplies, and terrifying silence. Eliza had left Philadelphia 3 weeks prior, fleeing a life that had become unbearable after her father's unexpected death left her at the mercy of creditors and unwanted suitors. The promise of teaching at a new school in Lead, South Dakota, had seemed like salvation, a chance to rebuild a life on her own terms. Now, as consciousness faded in and out, she realized she might never reach her destination. Blood trickled from her temple as she tried to move. Pain shot through her leg and she gasped, collapsing back against the hard Dakota earth. Her driver was nowhere to be seen. Had he been thrown clear? Had he abandoned her? The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and Eliza knew she couldn't survive long in the open without water or shelter. "Help," she called weakly, her voice barely audible even to her own ears. "Please, someone." The distant sound of hoofbeats seemed like a hallucination, at first a desperate wish manifested by her injured mind. But the rhythm grew stronger, more distinct, and Eliza forced her eyes open as a shadow fell across her face. A man dismounted in one fluid motion, his movements swift and practiced. Dust swirled around his boots as he approached, the sun at his back turning him into little more than a silhouette crowned by a wide-brimmed hat. "Miss." His voice was deep, concerned. "My God, what happened here?" He knelt beside her, and Eliza caught sight of his face, weathered by sun and wind, but handsome, with eyes as blue as a summer sky. He couldn't have been more than 30, with a strength to his features that spoke of a life lived outdoors. "Wagon overturned," she managed, each word an effort. "My leg." His gaze moved quickly, assessing her injuries with practiced efficiency. When his fingers gently probed her ankle, she cried out. "I've got you now," he said, his voice softening as he slipped one arm beneath her shoulders and another under her knees. "I've got you." As he lifted her against his chest, Eliza caught the scent of leather, horses, and something uniquely male. Her last thought before darkness claimed her was that at least she wouldn't die alone in this vast, unforgiving wilderness. Nathan Blackburn had not planned to detour from his usual route back to his ranch. If he hadn't spotted a lone hawk circling overhead, usually a sign of something dead or dying below, he might never have discovered the overturned wagon or the injured woman lying beside it. Now, with this mysterious city woman unconscious in his arms, Nathan felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. His ranch was closest, a good 2 hours' ride from where they were, but Lead was at least double that distance. With night approaching and the woman clearly in need of immediate care, he had little choice. Mounting his horse with the woman cradled against him was no easy feat, but years of working with livestock had given Nathan both strength and balance. He adjusted her carefully, ensuring her injured leg wouldn't be jostled too severely, then turned his horse toward home. "Hang on, miss," he murmured, though she couldn't hear him. "Just hang on." The journey back to his ranch seemed interminable. Every groan or whimper from his passenger sent a jolt of concern through Nathan. He had tended his share of injuries over the years, broken bones, lacerations, even a bullet wound once when a neighboring rancher got careless during hunting season. But there was something about this woman that made him particularly anxious for her well-being. Perhaps it was the delicacy of her features, or the way her dark lashes lay against pale cheeks. Or maybe it was simply that she was so clearly out of place here, her clothing finer than anything the local women wore, her hands uncalloused by hard labor. Whatever it was, Nathan found himself urging his horse to a pace just shy of dangerous over the uneven terrain. When his ranch finally came into view, a modest main house with several outbuildings nestled in a protected valley, Nathan felt relief wash over him. His foreman, Charlie, spotted him approaching and came running. "Boss, what in tarnation? Wagon accident," Nathan explained tersely. "Help me get her inside." Charlie, a weathered man in his 50s who had worked for Nathan's father before him, hurried to assist as Nathan dismounted, still holding the unconscious woman. "Should I fetch Doc Patterson?" Charlie asked, already moving toward his own horse. Nathan nodded. "Tell him it's urgent. Broken ankle at least, maybe worse. And Charlie," he paused, "bring back some of Mrs. Patterson's things. This lady will need fresh clothes when she wakes." As Charlie galloped off toward town, Nathan carried his burden into the house. His housekeeper, Mrs. Sullivan, gasped when she saw them but quickly recovered her composure. "Land's sake, Mr. Blackburn. Put the poor thing in the guest room. I'll heat water and fetch bandages." The guest room was small but clean, rarely used except when Nathan's sister visited from Denver. He laid the woman on the quilt-covered bed as gently as possible, hesitating as he considered what to do next. Her skirts were torn and filthy, her blouse stained with blood from a cut on her forehead. She needed tending, but propriety gave him pause. Mrs. Sullivan solved his dilemma by bustling in with a basin of water and clean cloths. "I'll see to her, Mr. Blackburn. You can wait outside." Nathan retreated gratefully, closing the door behind him. In the hallway, he ran a hand through his hair, suddenly aware of how dusty and disheveled he must look. Not that it mattered what the unconscious woman thought of his appearance, he told himself firmly. He paced the length of his modest sitting room for what seemed an eternity before Mrs. Sullivan emerged. "She's cleaned up as best I can manage without undressing her completely," the older woman reported. "That ankle is badly swollen, and she's got a nasty cut on her head, but her breathing's steady. I'll sit with her until the doctor arrives." Nathan nodded, feeling suddenly awkward in his own home. "Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan, I should. Check on the horses." The housekeeper gave him a knowing look that he pretended not to see. Outside, Nathan unsaddled his horse mechanically, his thoughts still with the mysterious woman. Who was she? What was she doing out here alone? The wagon had been well made, but not especially distinctive, a hired conveyance, most likely. Her clothing suggested money, or at least comfortable circumstances. A wedding ring. He hadn't noticed one. By the time Doc Patterson arrived, the sun had set, casting long shadows across the yard. The doctor, a portly man in his 60s with spectacles perched on his nose, clucked his tongue as Nathan led him inside. "Charlie says you found her by the South Trail," he asked. Nathan nodded. "Wagon overturned. No sign of a driver when I got there. Might have gone for help or might have decided to save his own skin. These hired drivers aren't always the most reliable sorts." The doctor disappeared into the guest room, his black bag in hand. It was nearly an hour before he emerged, looking tired but not especially concerned. "She'll live," he announced. "Broken ankle, as you suspected, and a concussion from the head wound. Several impressive bruises, but nothing life-threatening. I've set the ankle as best I can, but she'll need to stay off it for at least 6 weeks." 6 weeks? Nathan echoed. The responsibility he'd taken on suddenly stretched longer than anticipated. Doc Patterson shrugged. "Can't be helped. You could transport her to town once she's conscious, but the journey wouldn't do her any favors. Besides, the boarding house is full up with miners from that new claim south of town." "She can stay here," Mrs. Sullivan interjected firmly. "Poor lamb needs proper care, not to be jostled about from place to place." Nathan found himself nodding, though the prospect of having a strange woman in his house for 6 weeks was discomfiting. "Of course, whatever she needs." "She'll likely wake by morning," Doc Patterson said, packing up his instruments. "Give her laudanum for the pain, not too much. Mind you, and keep that ankle elevated. I'll come by in a few days to check on her." After the doctor left, Nathan stood uncertainly in the hallway, staring at the closed guest room door. Mrs. Sullivan had retired to her own quarters in the back of the house after promising to check on their patient through the night. For the first time in years, Nathan felt like a stranger in his own home. Sleep eluded him that night. He tossed and turned, his thoughts returning again and again to the woman down the hall. When the first gray light of dawn filtered through his window, Nathan gave up and dressed for the day. He had a ranch to run, regardless of the unexpected guest currently occupying his spare bedroom. He was in the kitchen drinking coffee when a scream split the morning quiet. Nathan nearly dropped his cup in his haste to reach the guest room. He threw open the door to find the woman sitting upright in bed, her eyes wide with fear, clutching the quilt to her chest. "Where am I? Who are you?" Her voice was higher than he remembered, tinged with panic. In the morning light, he could see that her eyes were a warm brown, currently filled with confusion and alarm. "You're safe," Nathan said, keeping his distance to avoid frightening her further. "My name is Nathan Blackburn. I found you yesterday after your wagon overturned. You're at my ranch about 15 miles south of Lead." The woman stared at him, her expression cycling through fear, confusion, and finally, tentative relief. "The wagon. Yes, I remember now." She touched her head gingerly, wincing at the bandage she found there. "You carried me," Nathan nodded. "Had to. Your ankle's broken, miss." He let the question hang. Whitfield. Eliza Whitfield. She attempted to shift position and gasped as pain shot through her leg. "Oh, try not to move," Nathan advised. "Doc Patterson set your ankle last night, but it needs time to heal. He says you'll be laid up for at least 6 weeks. 6 weeks?" Eliza's face fell. "But I'm supposed to be in Lead by next week. I'm the new school teacher." This information clicked several pieces into place for Nathan. The town had been eagerly anticipating the arrival of a qualified teacher from back east. Mayor Wilson had even mentioned it at the last town meeting, proud of having secured someone with proper credentials. "I'm afraid that'll have to wait," he said gently. "You won't be walking properly for some time." Eliza looked stricken, and Nathan hastened to reassure her. "I've sent word to town with Doc Patterson. They'll know what happened. I'm sure they'll hold the position for you." This seemed to calm her somewhat, though worry still creased her brow. "I don't understand. Where is Mr. Jenkins? He was driving the wagon." Nathan frowned. "There was no one else when I found you, just the overturned wagon and you lying beside it." "He must have gone for help," Eliza said, though she sounded uncertain. "Maybe so," Nathan agreed, not wanting to upset her further by suggesting abandonment. "In any case, you're welcome to stay here until you're recovered. Mrs. Sullivan, my housekeeper, is looking after you, and Doc Patterson left medicine for the pain." Eliza looked down, seemingly noticing for the first time that she was wearing a nightgown that wasn't her own. A blush spread across her cheeks. "Your wife? I'm not married, Miss Whitfield. Mrs. Sullivan changed your clothes. Mrs. Patterson, the doctor's wife, sent over some things for you to wear." "Oh." Her blush deepened. "I'm sorry to impose on you like this, Mr. Blackburn. If there's some way I could be transported to Lead, it's no imposition," Nathan interrupted, surprised to find he meant it. "And traveling now would only delay your recovery. Better to rest here until you're well enough to take up your teaching position." Before Eliza could respond, Mrs. Sullivan appeared in the doorway carrying a tray. "Ah, you're awake. I thought I heard voices." "I've brought you some breakfast, dear, and a cup of willow bark tea for the pain." Nathan retreated, leaving Eliza in Mrs. Sullivan's capable hands. He had chores waiting, and the woman's disconcerting presence was making him feel oddly off balance in a way he couldn't quite understand. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Nathan would check on Eliza briefly in the mornings before heading out to work his land. Mrs. Sullivan would care for her throughout the day, and in the evenings, Nathan would sometimes sit with her for a short while, answering her questions about the town and the surrounding area. Eliza, for her part, was determined to be as little trouble as possible. By the third day, she had insisted on being helped to a chair by the window where she could at least look out at the ranch. By the fifth, she had asked for books, which Nathan had brought from his modest library history volumes mostly, with a few dog-eared novels that had belonged to his mother. "You run this entire ranch by yourself?" Eliza asked one evening as they sat in the small parlor. Mrs. Sullivan had helped her dress in one of Mrs. Patterson's day dresses and arranged her hair, and Nathan found himself staring more than was polite. "Charlie helps," he replied, dragging his attention back to the conversation. "He's been with the place since before my father died, and I hire seasonal hands for roundup and branding. How long have you lived here?" "All my life." "My father established the ranch when the territory was first opened to settlement. He married my mother in '46, and I came along a year later." Nathan rarely spoke about his past, but something about Eliza's genuine interest loosened his tongue. "My sister Rebecca was born in '50, but my mother died bringing her into the world." "I'm sorry," Eliza said softly. "My own mother died when I was 12. It's a hard thing." Nathan nodded, recognizing the genuine understanding in her eyes. "My father raised us as best he could. He passed on 3 years ago. Heart gave out while he was mending fence. Rebecca married a banker in Denver 2 years back. It's just me now." "And you never married?" Eliza asked, then blushed at her own forwardness. "I'm sorry, that's not my business." "No, it's fine." Nathan found himself smiling slightly. "Never found the right woman, I suppose. Out here, there aren't many options, and I've never been one for town socials and courting rituals." "I understand that all too well," Eliza said with feeling. "My father tried to arrange a marriage for me before he died, a business associate twice my age who looked at me like I was a prize heifer at auction." Nathan chuckled at her blunt assessment. "Is that why you came west? Running from unwanted suitors?" "Partly," she admitted. "But also because I wanted to make my own way. Teaching is one of the few respectable professions open to women, and out here, I thought, I hoped I might find something I couldn't back east: independence, purpose." "You'll find both in Lead," Nathan assured her. "They're desperate for a proper teacher. The last one was a miner's wife who knew her letters but not much else." Eliza's smile was wistful. "If I ever get there, 6 weeks seems an eternity when you're confined to a chair or bed." "It'll pass quicker than you think," Nathan said, though he wasn't entirely sure if he wanted that to be true. As the first week stretched into the second, Nathan found himself lingering longer in the evenings, their conversations ranging from books they had read to childhood memories to hopes for the future. Eliza, he discovered, was not only educated but insightful, with a dry wit that caught him off guard and often made him laugh outright. For her part, Eliza was revising her initial impression of Nathan Blackburn. She had first seen him as the taciturn, somewhat intimidating figure who had rescued her, a typical Western man of few words and fewer expressions. But as they spoke more, she discovered layers to him that surprised and intrigued her. He had read more widely than she would have guessed, devouring books during the long winter months when ranch work slowed. He spoke knowledgeably about the politics shaping the territory and had strong opinions about the government's treatment of the native tribes who had once called these lands home. "It's not right," he told her one evening as they discussed recent conflicts. "The treaties are broken almost as soon as they're signed. No wonder there's fighting when promises are made and never kept." "I've read some accounts," Eliza said, "but the newspapers back east paint a very different picture than what you describe." "They would," Nathan replied grimly. "It's easier to call a man savage than to admit you've stolen everything he had." Such conversations made Eliza see the West and the man before her with new eyes. Nathan wasn't simply a cowboy. He was a man shaped by this land but not limited by it, with a moral compass that sometimes pointed in unexpected directions. By the third week, Eliza had progressed to moving about the house on crutches that Charlie had fashioned for her. Her first venture outside the house was to sit on the porch and breathe the fresh air, an excursion that left her both exhilarated and exhausted. "It's beautiful here," she told Nathan as they sat side by side, watching the sun set behind distant hills. "Different from what I expected." "What did you expect?" he asked, genuinely curious. Eliza laughed softly. "I'm not sure exactly. Something harsher, perhaps. The dime novels make the West sound like nothing but desert and danger." "There's plenty of both," Nathan acknowledged with a smile, "but beauty too, if you know where to look." His eyes lingered on her face as he spoke, and Eliza felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the evening sun. She looked away first, suddenly conscious of how alone they were. Mrs. Sullivan had gone into town for supplies, and Charlie was tending to the far pasture. "Tell me about Philadelphia," Nathan said, breaking the charged silence. "I've never been east of the Mississippi." Grateful for the change in subject, Eliza described her former home, the cobbled streets and brick buildings, the theaters and museums, the bustle of a city constantly in motion. "It sounds crowded," Nathan observed when she finished. "All those people pressed together." "It can be," Eliza admitted. "There were times I felt I couldn't breathe for all the people and noise and expectations. Here, at least, there's space to think. Too much space, some would say. Winters can be lonely." "Are you lonely, Nathan?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Using his first name without thinking, he looked at her, surprise flickering across his features, followed by something more complex. "Sometimes," he admitted quietly, "though less so these past weeks." The honesty of his answer caught Eliza off guard. She had grown accustomed to men who spoke in pleasantries and platitudes, never revealing what lay beneath. Nathan's straightforwardness was both refreshing and slightly unnerving. "I should go in," she said, suddenly flustered. "My ankle is beginning to ache." Nathan stood immediately, offering his arm for support. "Of course. Let me help you." His touch was warm through the fabric of her borrowed dress, and Eliza was acutely aware of his proximity as he helped her navigate the doorway. When they reached her room, she hesitated, not quite ready to end their conversation but uncertain how to prolong it. "Thank you," she said finally, reluctantly removing her hand from his arm. "For everything." Nathan's smile was gentle. "Sleep well, Eliza." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice followed her into her dreams that night. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Mayor Wilson and his wife arrived in their buggy, eager to meet the teacher who had suffered such misfortune on her way to their town. Mrs. Wilson was a plump, cheerful woman who immediately took Eliza's hand in both of hers. "My dear, what an ordeal you've been through. But how fortunate that Mr. Blackburn found you. He's one of our most respected citizens, you know." The mayor, a balding man with an impressive mustache, nodded in agreement. "Indeed, indeed. And rest assured, Miss Whitfield, your position is waiting for you when you've recovered. The children are making do with Mrs. Peterson in the meantime, but we all look forward to having a properly trained teacher in lead." "That's very kind," Eliza said, genuinely touched by their concern. "I'm eager to begin as soon as I'm able." "No rush, no rush," Mrs. Wilson insisted. "Better to heal completely than to start too soon. We've secured lodgings for you with the widow Harrington, a most respectable arrangement." As the conversation continued, Eliza found herself stealing glances at Nathan, who stood somewhat apart from the gathering. His expression was carefully neutral, but she thought she detected a certain tension in his stance. The Wilsons didn't stay long, mindful of Eliza's need for rest. But before they left, Mrs. Wilson pressed a package into her hands. "Some reading material and a few treats from town," she explained. "And a letter that arrived for you. We've been holding your mail." Only after they had gone did Eliza open the letter, her brow furrowing as she read its contents. "Bad news?" Nathan asked, noticing her expression. Eliza looked up, momentarily having forgotten his presence. "It's from my cousin in Philadelphia. It seems the man my father wanted me to marry hasn't given up his pursuit. He's made inquiries about my whereabouts." Nathan frowned. "He followed you here." "Not yet, apparently, but my cousin warns he's determined." Eliza folded the letter carefully. "I had hoped distance alone would discourage him." "Some men don't take no for an answer," Nathan said grimly. "If he shows up here, you won't have to face him alone." The protectiveness in his voice stirred something in Eliza's chest. "Thank you," she said softly. "Though I hope it won't come to that." The visit from the Wilsons and the letter from her cousin served as reminders of the world beyond the ranch, a world that would reclaim Eliza soon enough. As her ankle continued to heal, she found herself increasingly torn. She had come west to teach, had signed a contract and made commitments. Yet the thought of leaving the ranch, leaving Nathan, filled her with an unexpected sadness. For his part, Nathan found himself dreading the day when Eliza would be well enough to leave. Her presence had brought life and conversation to his quiet home. Mrs. Sullivan had remarked more than once that she hadn't seen him smile so much in years. "You know, Mrs. Sullivan said to Eliza one afternoon as they shelled peas on the porch, "I've worked for Mr. Blackburn since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. Never seen him take to anyone the way he's taken to you." Eliza's hand stilled over the bowl of peas. "Mrs. Sullivan, no need to say anything, dear," the older woman interrupted with a knowing smile. "Just an observation from someone who's watched that boy grow up lonely. His sister Rebecca used to worry about him out here all by himself, but she'll be pleased to know he's found some company at last." "I'll be leaving soon," Eliza reminded her, ignoring the pang the words caused. "Once my ankle is fully healed." Mrs. Sullivan merely hummed noncommittally and returned to her task, leaving Eliza to wonder what exactly the housekeeper had seen that Eliza herself was reluctant to acknowledge. That evening, Nathan surprised her by suggesting they eat dinner outside under the stars. "It's a clear night," he explained, "and warm enough. Mrs. Sullivan's made a picnic of sorts." The idea was so unexpected and charming that Eliza agreed immediately. With Nathan's help, she made her way to a spot not far from the house where Mrs. Sullivan had spread a blanket and left a basket of food. A lantern provided just enough light to see by without dimming the spectacular canopy of stars overhead. "I've never seen so many stars," Eliza marveled as they ate. "In Philadelphia, the city lights obscure all but the brightest." "One of the benefits of being in the middle of nowhere," Nathan replied with a smile. "Though I suppose it seems very primitive to someone used to city conveniences." "Not primitive," Eliza corrected him. "Just different. There's a kind of honesty to life here that I find appealing. In Philadelphia, everything is wrapped in layers of pretense and social expectation." "We have our own expectations out here," Nathan pointed out. "They're just different ones." "True," Eliza acknowledged. "But at least they make sense. Work hard, be honest, help your neighbors. Those are values I can understand. Back east, it was all about who your family knew, what parties you attended, whether your dress was the latest fashion." "And you didn't fit in," Nathan guessed. Eliza laughed softly. "Not particularly. My father was respected for his business acumen, but we were never quite accepted by the old money families. And after my mother died, I had little interest in the social whirl." "So you decided to become a teacher instead of a society wife." "Exactly." Eliza looked up at the stars again. "My father was disappointed. He wanted grandchildren, a son-in-law to take over his business. When he arranged the match with Mr. Hargrove, he thought he was securing my future. And instead, you ran away to the wilderness. I prefer to think of it as moving towards something, not running away, Eliza said, turning to face him, toward a life of my own choosing. Nathan's expression softened in the lantern light. A brave choice. Sometimes I wonder, Eliza admitted. When the wagon overturned, I thought perhaps I had made a terrible mistake, that I would die alone out here and no one would even know what had become of me. But I found you, Nathan said quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. I've got you now. The words echoed what he had said when he first discovered her, but they carried a different weight now. Eliza was acutely aware of how close they sat, of the warmth of his presence beside her, of the way his gaze made her pulse quicken. Nathan, she began, not entirely sure what she meant to say. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The simple gesture sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the evening air. I know you'll be leaving soon, he said, his voice low, and I have no right to ask you to stay. You came here to teach, to build a life and lead, but I would be lying if I said I won't miss you when you go. Eliza swallowed, her throat suddenly tight with emotion. I'll miss you too. His hand lingered near her face and Eliza leaned into his touch, a silent permission. Nathan hesitated only a moment before bending toward her, his lips meeting hers in a kiss so gentle it nearly broke her heart. When they parted, Eliza's mind was spinning. She had been kissed before fumbling advances from young men at parties, quickly rebuffed, but nothing like this. Nothing that made her feel as though the ground beneath her had shifted. Nathan's expression was a mixture of wonder and uncertainty. I shouldn't have. Don't apologize, Eliza interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. Unless you regret it. I don't, he said immediately. Not for a second. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what had just transpired settling around them like a cloak. What happens now? Eliza finally asked, giving voice to the question that hung in the air between them. Nathan took her hand, his calloused fingers entwining with hers. I don't know, he admitted. I've never been good at this sort of thing, but I do know that what I feel for you is something I've never felt before. His honesty was disarming, and Eliza found herself responding in kind. I came west to be independent, to build a life on my own terms. I never expected to care for someone the way I find myself caring for you. Does it have to be one or the other? Nathan asked. Independence or whatever this is between us? Eliza considered the question seriously. I don't know. I've only ever seen marriage as a kind of cage, at least, the marriages I witnessed in Philadelphia. It doesn't have to be that way, Nathan said. My parents had a partnership. They worked side by side, made decisions together. My father never saw my mother as less than his equal. The image he painted was appealing, so different from the rigid roles Eliza had observed in Eastern marriages. Still, the practical concerns remained. I have a contract to fulfill in Lead, and you have your ranch here. Lead is less than a day's ride, Nathan pointed out. Not so very far. Hope flickered in Eliza's chest. You would be willing to court me properly, even with the distance, Nathan smiled, squeezing her hand. Eliza Whitfield, I would ride through blizzards to see you. A few hours on horseback is nothing. His declaration made her laugh even as tears pricked at her eyes. You hardly know me. I know enough, he said simply. I know you're brave and intelligent and determined. I know you care deeply about things that matter. The rest, well, that's what courting is for, isn't it? To learn all the things we don't yet know about each other. Put that way, it seemed so straightforward, yet Eliza knew the reality would be far more complicated. The school board may not approve of their teacher being courted. Many towns have strict rules about such things. Let me worry about that, Nathan said confidently. I've known Wilson and the others all my life. They're reasonable men. Eliza wanted to believe that the connection they had found could flourish despite the obstacles. "Perhaps we should take it one day at a time," she suggested. "See what happens when I'm well enough to take up my position." Nathan nodded, though she thought she detected a flicker of disappointment in his eyes. "Of course. No need to make decisions tonight." He helped her back to the house soon after, the moment between them still humming like a plucked string. At her bedroom door, he kissed her again, briefly but with a promise that made Eliza's breath catch. "Good night, Eliza," he murmured. "Good night, Nathan," she replied, watching him walk away with a mixture of joy and trepidation swirling in her chest. The next morning brought an unexpected development. Dr. Patterson arrived for his regular check on Eliza's progress, but he wasn't alone. A disheveled man accompanied him, Mr. Jenkins, the driver who had disappeared after the wagon accident. "Found him in the saloon in Deadwood," Dr. Patterson explained as Jenkins shuffled his feet nervously. "Seems he's got something to tell Miss Whitfield." Eliza, seated in the parlor with her injured leg propped on a footstool, regarded her former driver with cool assessment. "Mr. Jenkins, I wondered what had become of you, Miss Whitfield," Jenkins began, twisting his hat in his hands. "I owe you an apology. When the wagon overturned, I thought. That is, you weren't moving and I feared you were dead. I panicked, miss. Took what I could salvage and headed for Deadwood." "You abandoned her." Nathan's voice was dangerously quiet. He stood by the fireplace, his posture rigid with barely contained anger. Jenkins paled. "I ain't proud of it, sir. When I heard in town that she'd survived, I knew I had to come and make things right." "Make things right?" Nathan took a step forward, but Eliza raised a hand to stop him. "What exactly do you mean by that, Mr. Jenkins?" she asked, her tone measured. The driver reached into his coat and pulled out a small pouch. "Your valuables, miss, the locket with your mother's picture and the brooch you wore. I took them, thinking you wouldn't need them anymore. I'm returning them now, along with what's left of your travel money." He placed the pouch on the table beside Eliza, avoiding her gaze. "Thank you for bringing these back," Eliza said after a moment. "Though I wish you had shown the same concern for my welfare at the time of the accident." Jenkins nodded miserably. "I understand if you want to press charges, miss. Doc says what I did could be considered criminal negligence." Eliza glanced at Nathan, whose expression suggested he would fully support such a course of action. But something, perhaps the weeks of experiencing the harsh realities of frontier life, made her hesitate. "I won't press charges," she said finally, "but I expect you to repay the full cost of my passage and my lost belongings. Dr. Patterson can act as intermediary." Relief washed over Jenkins's face. "Yes, miss. Thank you, miss. I'll work it off if I have to." "There's a new mine opening up near Lead." "That's enough, Jenkins," Dr. Patterson interrupted. "You can express your gratitude by making good on your debt. Now, I need to examine Miss Whitfield's ankle." After the men had left the room to give Eliza privacy for her examination, Dr. Patterson offered an encouraging assessment. "You're healing remarkably well. Another 2 weeks, and you should be able to put weight on that ankle. Not for long periods, mind you, but enough to start getting about more easily." 2 weeks, Eliza repeated, feeling an unexpected pang at the thought of how quickly her time at the ranch was passing. Dr. Patterson's eyes twinkled knowingly. "Yes, though I'd still recommend against traveling to Lead until you're fully recovered. Say 4 more weeks total." "But you just said—" "I said you could start putting weight on it," he interrupted with a smile. "Not that you should be bouncing around in a wagon for hours. Best to complete your recovery here, where you have proper care." After he had gone, taking Jenkins with him, Nathan found Eliza sitting thoughtfully by the window. "You were very merciful with Jenkins," he observed. "More than he deserved." Eliza sighed. "Perhaps, but what would pressing charges accomplish? He seems genuinely remorseful, and this way at least I'll recover some of my losses." Still, to leave you like that. Nathan's jaw tightened. If I had found him first. Then I'm glad you didn't, Eliza said firmly. There's been enough misfortune without adding violence to it. Nathan's expression softened. You have a generous heart, Eliza Whitfield. Not always, she admitted with a small smile. But I'm learning that out here, people make different choices than they might elsewhere. The circumstances are harsher. That's true enough, Nathan agreed. Though it doesn't excuse cowardice. No, Eliza conceded. But it helps me understand it, at least. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Charlie, who needed Nathan's input on a matter concerning the herd. As Nathan excused himself, promising to return for dinner, Eliza turned back to the window, her thoughts in turmoil. 2 weeks, possibly 4, before she would need to leave for Lead. The prospect, which once would have filled her with anticipation, now brought a complicated mix of emotions. She had come west to teach, to find independence and purpose. Yet in the aftermath of disaster, she had found something else entirely, a connection with Nathan that challenged her carefully laid plans. Could she have both? A career of her own and whatever might develop between them. The practicalities seemed daunting. Lead was 15 miles away, not an impossible distance, as Nathan had pointed out, but not convenient either, especially in winter. And what of her long-term plans? She had intended to establish herself as a teacher, perhaps eventually open a school of her own. How would those ambitions fit with Nathan's life as a rancher? Questions without answers swirled through her mind as the days passed. Eliza's strength returned gradually, and with Dr. Patterson's blessing, she began taking short walks outside, leaning on Nathan's arm for support. These excursions became the highlight of her day's opportunities to explore the ranch, and more significantly, to spend time alone with Nathan. He showed her his favorite spots on the property. A small creek where trout darted in the clear water, a hillside that bloomed with wildflowers in spring, a stand of ancient cottonwoods that provided shade even in the hottest part of summer. My father proposed to my mother under these trees, Nathan told her as they rested on a fallen log. He used to bring us here for picnics when we were children, said it was the most peaceful place on earth. Eliza could understand why. The leaves rustled gently overhead, and the distant lowing of cattle provided a soothing backdrop to their conversation. It's beautiful. I thought you might like it, Nathan said, watching her face with a warmth that made her cheeks flush. Since their night under the stars, they had exchanged more kisses, each one deepening the connection between them, making the inevitable parting more difficult to contemplate. They spoke of many things during their walks, their childhoods, their hopes, the books they had read, but they carefully avoided discussing what would happen when Eliza left for Lead. The issue could not be avoided forever, however. With just over a week remaining before Dr. Patterson deemed her fit to travel, Eliza knew they needed to address the uncertainty that hung between them. Nathan, she began one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. We need to talk about what happens when I go to Lead. He nodded, his expression serious. I've been thinking about that too. Have you reached any conclusions? Eliza asked, her heart beating faster. Nathan turned to face her fully. Only that I don't want what we've found here to end. I meant what I said about courting you properly, Eliza. Distance be damned. The conviction in his voice bolstered her courage. I want that too, but I'm still not sure how it would work in practice. The school board, I spoke with Mayor Wilson yesterday, Nathan interrupted, when he came by to check on the cattle I'm selling him. Eliza blinked in surprise. You spoke to him about us. I did, Nathan confirmed. I told him I intended to court you once you were settled in Lead, and I wanted to ensure that wouldn't jeopardize your position. And what did he say? Eliza asked, hardly daring to breathe. A smile spread across Nathan's face. He said it was about time I showed interest in something besides cattle, and that the board would have no objection to the teacher being courted so long as her work didn't suffer for it. Relief flooded through Eliza. So there's no impediment, from that quarter at least. None, Nathan agreed. Though I should warn you that Mrs. Wilson immediately began planning social events where we could be seen together. I believe she fancies herself a matchmaker. Eliza laughed, the tension easing from her shoulders. I can live with that. But Nathan, what about the practical considerations? The distance, the different nature of our work. We'll figure it out, he said confidently. I can ride to Leeds several times a week. You can come to the ranch on weekends when weather permits. And as for our work, why shouldn't a rancher court a schoolteacher? They're both honorable professions. His optimism was infectious, and Eliza found herself nodding. When you put it that way, it sounds almost simple. It won't be, Nathan admitted. Nothing worthwhile ever is, but Eliza. He took her hands in his. I believe what we have is worth whatever challenges come with it. The certainty in his voice, the warmth of his hands around hers, made Eliza's last doubts begin to dissolve. So do I, she said softly. Nathan's smile was like the sunrise, slow to dawn but brilliantly warm once it appeared. He leaned forward to kiss her, a kiss full of promise and possibility. The day of Eliza's departure arrived with mixed emotions. Her trunks salvaged from the wagon crash, and supplemented with items the women of Leeds had generously provided, were loaded onto Nathan's wagon. Mrs. Sullivan had packed a basket of food for the journey, and even Charlie had emerged from his usual reserve to wish Eliza well. You'll be missed around here, Miss Whitfield, the foreman said gruffly. Place won't be the same without you. Thank you, Charlie, Eliza replied, touched by his uncharacteristic sentimentality. I'll be back to visit soon. Mrs. Sullivan embraced her warmly. You take care in that boarding house, dear, and remember you're always welcome here. When the time came to leave, Eliza found herself lingering on the porch, reluctant to take the final step away from the place that had become a second home. Nathan, sensing her hesitation, took her hand. It's not goodbye, he reminded her. Just until next time. Eliza nodded, swallowing past the lump in her throat. Until next time. The journey to Leeds passed more quickly than Eliza expected, filled with Nathan's stories about the land they traversed and the history of the region. As they approached the town, Eliza's nervousness about her new position mingled with a strange sense of homecoming. Leeds was larger than she had expected, a bustling mining town with wooden sidewalks, several substantial buildings of brick, and a surprising number of amenities for a frontier community. The school, Nathan pointed out, was the new wooden structure near the church. Mayor Wilson insisted on proper facilities for the children, he explained. Said educated minors were less likely to cause trouble. Mrs. Harrington, Eliza's landlady, proved to be a cheerful widow in her 50s who immediately took Eliza under her wing. Mr. Blackburn, how lovely to see you. And this must be our new teacher. Welcome to Leeds, Miss Whitfield. You're looking well for someone who nearly died in the wilderness. Her frankness made Eliza laugh, easing the transition. Mrs. Harrington showed her to a comfortable room on the second floor of a well-maintained house, just 2 blocks from the school. The rules are simple, she explained as she helped Eliza unpack. No gentlemen callers after 8 in the evening, no spirits kept in your room, and meals are served promptly at 7, noon, and 6. Beyond that, your time is your own. She cast a knowing glance at Nathan, who was bringing in the last of Eliza's trunks. Though I understand Mr. Blackburn here has intentions that might occupy some of that time. Eliza blushed, and Nathan cleared his throat awkwardly. News travels fast in Leeds, he muttered. Like lightning, Mrs. Harrington agreed cheerfully. But don't worry. I'm not one of those landladies who thinks a young woman shouldn't have a beau. Just be respectful of the house rules, and we'll get along fine. After ensuring Eliza was comfortably settled, Nathan reluctantly prepared to leave. "I should get back before dark," he said. "But I'll ride in on Sunday if that suits you." "I'd like that very much," Eliza replied, walking with him to where his wagon waited. Their parting was witnessed by several curious townspeople, but Nathan seemed unconcerned by the attention. He took Eliza's hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture that managed to be both proper enough for public view and intimate enough to make her pulse quicken. "Sunday," he promised. Eliza watched his wagon until it disappeared around a bend in the road, then squared her shoulders and turned back toward her new home. A new chapter was beginning, but unlike the one she had originally envisioned, this story now included Nathan Blackburn. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Eliza met with the school board, toured the schoolhouse, and began preparing for classes that would start the following Monday. The children of Lead, she discovered, ranged from barely literate to surprisingly well-educated, depending largely on their backgrounds. "The mining families come and go," explained Mrs. Peterson, the woman who had been temporarily teaching. "But there's a core of permanent residents whose children form the backbone of the school. 37 students in all, ages 6 to 16. It was a daunting prospect, but Eliza threw herself into preparations with enthusiasm. By the time Sunday arrived, she had organized lesson plans, arranged the schoolroom to her satisfaction, and begun to feel like the teacher she had trained to be. Nathan arrived promptly at 11, dressed in what Eliza recognized as his best shirt and cleanly shaven. The sight of him standing on Mrs. Harrington's porch, hat in hand, brought a smile to her face that lasted throughout their afternoon together. He took her to dinner at the hotel, the finest establishment in Lead, where several townspeople stopped by their table to introduce themselves. Eliza was touched by the warm welcome and by Nathan's evident pride in introducing her as our new school teacher. "They like you," he observed as they walked back to Mrs. Harrington's. "Not that I'm surprised. I've barely done anything yet," Eliza protested. "Wait until I've actually taught their children for a while. You'll be wonderful," Nathan said with such conviction that Eliza couldn't help but believe him. Their courtship fell into a rhythm as autumn deepened toward winter. Nathan rode into town every Sunday without fail, and occasionally during the week if ranch duties permitted. Eliza, for her part, found herself thriving as a teacher. The challenges were substantial: teaching children of widely varying ages and abilities in a single room required creativity and patience, but the rewards were equally significant. "Miss Whitfield," announced Tommy Wilson, the mayor's 10-year-old son, after successfully reading a difficult passage, "you're the best teacher we've ever had." "Thank you, Tommy," Eliza replied, concealing her amusement at his earnest declaration. "But I believe in giving credit where it's due. You've worked very hard." Such moments of connection with her students reinforced Eliza's conviction that she had made the right choice in coming west. Yet increasingly, her satisfaction in teaching was matched by her anticipation of Nathan's visits. They attended church services together, joined community gatherings, and once, when the weather was especially fine, rode out to a nearby lake for a picnic. Gradually, Eliza was introduced to Nathan's friends and business associates, just as he became familiar with her colleagues and the families of her students. "Mr. Blackburn seems quite taken with you," observed Miss Prentice, the seamstress, as Eliza was fitted for a new winter coat. "Half the unmarried women in the county have set their caps for him over the years, but he never showed interest until you came along." "Is that so?" Eliza tried to sound nonchalant, though the information pleased her more than she cared to admit. Miss Prentice nodded knowingly. "They're already taking bets at the saloon about when he'll propose. Spring is the favorite, though some say he won't wait that long." The casual mention of marriage sent a flutter through Eliza's stomach. They had not discussed the subject directly since that night on the porch when Nathan had committed to courting her. Yet increasingly, Eliza found herself imagining a future that combined her teaching with a life alongside Nathan. Winter arrived with a vengeance in late November, blanketing the hills in snow and making travel between Lead and the ranch more difficult. Nathan still came when he could, but his visits became less frequent as weather and road conditions deteriorated. "I don't like the thought of you out there in blizzards," Eliza told him during one visit after a particularly arduous journey. "Promise me you won't take unnecessary risks." "Worried about me, Miss Whitfield," Nathan teased, but his expression softened at her genuine concern. "I promise to be careful, but I'm not going to let a little snow keep me from seeing you." December brought both the harshest weather and the joy of Christmas preparations. The school put on a pageant, with Eliza directing nervous children through biblical scenes and Christmas carols. Nathan sat in the front row, his face aglow with pride as Eliza was presented with a handmade gift from her students, a quilt, with each square contributed by a different child. "They adore you," he said later as they sat in Mrs. Harrington's parlor, warmed by the fireplace and cups of hot cider. "The whole town does. I've been fortunate," Eliza acknowledged. "Everyone has been so welcoming." "It's more than that," Nathan insisted. "You've made a difference here, Eliza. The children are learning, parents are involved in the school in ways they never were before, and even the most skeptical of the minors can see the value in what you're doing." His praise warmed her more than the fire. "Thank you. That means a great deal, especially coming from you." Nathan set down his cup and took her hand. "I have something for you, an early Christmas gift." From his pocket, he withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with a simple string. Eliza unwrapped it carefully to reveal a silver locket, intricately engraved with wildflowers. "Oh, Nathan," she breathed, opening the locket to find a tiny pressed flower inside a blossom she recognized from the cottonwood grove where his father had proposed to his mother. "I know it's not as fine as the jewelry you might have had back east," Nathan began, but Eliza stopped him with a finger to his lips. "It's perfect," she said. "The most meaningful gift I've ever received." She turned so he could fasten the locket around her neck, his fingers warm against her skin. When she faced him again, the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "Eliza," he said, his voice low and serious, "I know we haven't known each other long by some standards. But these past months have shown me everything I need to know about what kind of woman you are." He took both her hands in his. "I love you. I think I've loved you since I found you by that overturned wagon, though I didn't recognize it then. I know this is sudden and I don't expect an answer right away, but yes," Eliza interrupted, unable to contain the joy bubbling up inside her. Nathan blinked. "Yes, but I haven't asked the question yet." Eliza laughed, tears of happiness pricking at her eyes. "Then ask it, Nathan Blackburn, so I can say yes properly." A slow smile spread across his face. "Eliza Whitfield, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," she said again, with all the certainty in her heart. "Yes, I will." Nathan pulled her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the love and promise of their future together. When they finally parted, both breathless and laughing, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I was prepared to argue my case," he admitted. "I had a whole speech planned about how we could make it work with your teaching and the ranch." "Save it," Eliza suggested, her eyes dancing. "We may need those arguments for Mrs. Wilson when she discovers she wasn't the one who orchestrated our engagement." The news of their engagement spread through Lead with predictable speed. By the following day, Eliza was receiving congratulations from people she had barely met, and Mrs. Harrington was already discussing the logistics of a wedding. Spring would be lovely, the landlady mused over breakfast. "After the mud season, but before it gets too hot." And of course, you'll want the whole town there. Everyone will expect an invitation. Eliza and Nathan, however, had other ideas. With the school term ending for Christmas break and Nathan's ranch work at its winter minimum, they saw no reason to wait until spring. New Year's Day, Nathan suggested when they discussed it. A fresh start, a new year, a new life together. The proposal was romantic and practical at once, characteristic of the man himself. Eliza agreed readily, and plans were quickly put in motion for a ceremony to be held in the Lead Church on the first day of 1877. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur of preparations. Eliza's students presented her with gifts and well wishes on the last day of school before the holiday break. The women of Lead rallied around her, offering everything from cooking advice to hand-me-down household items for her new home. "You'll need these, Mrs. Wilson declared, presenting Eliza with a set of fine linen tablecloths. A rancher's wife must be prepared to entertain. The term rancher's wife still sounded strange to Eliza's ears, but she was gradually adjusting to the idea of this new identity. She would continue teaching. Nathan had insisted they had already received the school board's blessing for this arrangement, but she would also take on responsibilities at the ranch. "Are you nervous?" Mrs. Harrington asked on New Year's Eve as she helped Eliza prepare for bed. Eliza considered the question seriously. "Not about marrying Nathan," she said finally, "but about all that comes with it. Yes, a little." The older woman patted her hand. "That's natural, dear. Marriage changes everything, especially for a woman. But from what I've seen of Mr. Blackburn, you've chosen well. He looks at you like you hung the moon." "The feeling is mutual," Eliza admitted with a smile. "Then you'll be fine," Mrs. Harrington assured her. "The rest is just details." New Year's Day dawned clear and cold, with fresh snow that made the world outside sparkle like diamonds. Mrs. Harrington and several other women helped Eliza dress in a gown of pale blue silk, a gift from Nathan's sister Rebecca, who had arrived from Denver 2 days before with her husband. "Nathan will be speechless," Rebecca predicted as she arranged Eliza's hair. "I've never seen my brother so happy, you know. Our father would have adored you." The church was packed with what seemed like every resident of Lead and the surrounding areas. Even some of the miners who rarely attended services had turned out, their usually rough appearance softened by clean shirts and slicked-back hair. Nathan waited at the altar, looking both nervous and determined in a new suit. When Eliza appeared at the back of the church on Mayor Wilson's arm, standing in for her father, Nathan's expression transformed into one of such naked adoration that murmurs rippled through the congregation. The ceremony itself passed in a blur for Eliza. She remembered the warmth of Nathan's hands holding hers, the sincerity in his voice as he recited his vows, and the moment when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife. Nathan's kiss was brief but tender, mindful of their audience but conveying a promise of more to come. The celebration afterward was boisterous and joyful, with food contributed by what seemed like every household in Lead. There was dancing in the town hall, speeches from well-wishers, and enough cake to feed twice the number present. As evening approached, Nathan drew Eliza aside. "Ready to go home?" he asked softly. "Home. The ranch that would now be theirs together." Eliza nodded, feeling a flutter of anticipation mixed with a touch of nervousness. They left amid cheers and handfuls of rice thrown for good luck. Nathan had his best sleigh prepared, with heated bricks wrapped in flannel for their feet and thick buffalo robes to ward off the cold. As they departed, Eliza looked back at the town that had welcomed her so warmly, then forward to the future that awaited. The journey to the ranch was magical in the moonlight, the sleigh runners hissing over packed snow as the horse trotted steadily homeward. Nathan kept one arm around Eliza, occasionally pressing kisses to her temple or hair. "Happy." he asked as they crested a hill and the ranch came into view, lanterns lit to welcome them home. Very, Eliza assured him, and it was true. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she faced them with the certainty that she had found where she belonged. Mrs. Sullivan had prepared the house for their arrival, with a fire burning in the fireplace and a light meal laid out in the kitchen. More significantly, she had tactfully retired to her own quarters, leaving the newly married couple to their privacy. After they had eaten, Nathan led Eliza to what was now their bedroom. The space had been transformed, fresh curtains hung at the windows, new linens adorned the bed, and a small vase of winter hothouse flowers sat on the dresser. "Rebecca's doing," Nathan explained, seeing Eliza's surprise. "She came out yesterday to help Mrs. Sullivan prepare." "It's lovely," Eliza said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness. Nathan's arms encircled her from behind, his breath warm against her ear. "You're lovely," he murmured. "My wife." Eliza turned in his embrace, her heart full to bursting with love for this man who had found her broken and alone, who had offered not just healing but a future beyond anything she had imagined. "I love you, Nathan Blackburn," she whispered against his lips. "More than I ever thought possible." His answer was in his kiss. In the gentle way he removed the pins from her hair, in every touch and whispered endearment that followed. Their coming together was a culmination of all that had passed between them and a beginning of all that lay ahead, tender, passionate, and deeply right. In the quiet aftermath, as they lay entwined beneath the quilts with moonlight streaming through the window, Eliza reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The overturned wagon that had seemed like disaster had instead been the first step toward the greatest happiness of her life. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. Eliza smiled up at him. "About how sometimes what looks like misfortune can turn out to be the greatest blessing. Like a broken ankle that keeps a beautiful woman captive on my ranch." He suggested with a grin. "Exactly like that," she agreed, pressing a kiss to his chest, "though I'd hardly call it captivity." "No." His eyebrow quirked playfully. "What would you call it, then?" Eliza pretended to consider. "A detour. One that led exactly where I was meant to go all along." Nathan's expression softened as he pulled her closer. "Welcome home, Eliza Blackburn." In his arms, with the promise of all their tomorrows stretching before them, Eliza knew she had indeed found her true home, not in a place, but in the heart of the man who had once cradled her broken body and promised, "I've got you now." It was a promise he had kept and would keep through all the years to come. The years that followed proved both challenging and rewarding for Eliza and Nathan. As winter gave way to spring, Eliza settled into the rhythm of life as both a teacher and a rancher's wife. Weekday mornings found her at the schoolhouse in Lead, while evenings and weekends were devoted to the ranch and her new husband. The arrangement required compromises on both sides. During the school week, Eliza stayed at a small cottage Nathan purchased in Lead, returning to the ranch each Friday afternoon. Nathan, for his part, made the journey to town at least once during the week, unwilling to go too many days without seeing his wife. "The men are starting to tease me," he told her one evening as they sat before the fire in their town cottage. "They say I'm lovesick as a schoolboy." "And are you?" Eliza asked, smiling as she set aside her lesson plans. Nathan pulled her onto his lap, his arms wrapping securely around her waist. "Completely. I miss you when you're not at the ranch." "I miss you too," she admitted, resting her head against his shoulder. "But I'm grateful you support my teaching. Many husbands wouldn't." "Many husbands are fools," Nathan replied simply. "Your work matters, Eliza. I've seen how those children look at you, how much they're learning. I'd never ask you to give that up." It was this understanding, this partnership of equals, that formed the foundation of their marriage. When summer came and school ended for the season, Eliza threw herself into ranch life with enthusiasm, learning about cattle and horses under Nathan's patient tutelage. "You're a natural," he observed as she confidently guided her mare alongside the herd during a small cattle drive. Most city women would be terrified. Eliza laughed, exhilarated by the physical work and the open sky above them. "I'm still a city woman in many ways, but I'm learning to love this life." And she was. There was satisfaction in the direct connection between work and results, in seeing calves grow strong under their care, in improving the ranch bit by bit with each passing season. Nathan had ambitious plans for expanding their operation, and Eliza found herself fully invested in these dreams. When autumn approached, and with it the new school term, Eliza faced a difficult decision. Her first year of teaching in lead had been successful by any measure. Her students had progressed remarkably, and the community held her in high regard. Yet the constant travel between town and ranch, while manageable, took its toll. "I've been thinking," she told Nathan one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the hills in gold and crimson. "What if I didn't return to the school in lead this year?" Nathan looked at her in surprise. "I thought you loved teaching there." "I do," Eliza assured him, "but I've had an idea. There are at least a dozen children within riding distance of our ranch whose families can't send them regularly to the lead school. What if I started a small school here? We could use that old bunkhouse you've been planning to tear down. With some renovation, it would make a perfectly adequate classroom." Nathan's expression shifted from surprise to thoughtful consideration. "You're serious about this?" "Completely," Eliza confirmed. "I'd miss my students in lead, of course, but there are children here who need education just as badly, maybe more so, since they currently have none at all." The more they discussed the idea, the more enthusiastic Nathan became. By the end of the evening, they were sketching plans for converting the bunkhouse and making lists of potential students from neighboring ranches. Word of Eliza's proposed school spread quickly through the scattered community of ranchers and homesteaders. Within weeks, she had commitments from families representing 15 children, ranging in age from 6 to 14. Nathan set to work on the bunkhouse, enlisting Charlie and several hired hands to transform the sturdy structure into a proper schoolroom. "It's not as grand as the lead school," Nathan apologized as they surveyed the finished space, with its freshly whitewashed walls, new windows, and rows of simple desks crafted by a local carpenter. "It's perfect," Eliza assured him, already envisioning how she would arrange her books and teaching materials. "More importantly, it's needed." The Blackburn Ranch School, as it came to be known, opened its doors in September 1877. Children arrived on horseback or in wagons, some traveling considerable distances for the opportunity to learn. Eliza approached the challenge with the same dedication she had shown in lead, adapting her methods to accommodate the diverse ages and abilities of her new students. "Miss Eliza," asked 7-year-old Sarah Jensen after the first week, "are you going to have a baby like my mama? She says all new wives have babies right away." The innocent question caught Eliza off guard, bringing color to her cheeks. "That's not something we discuss in school, Sarah," she said gently. "But no, not yet." The truth was, Eliza and Nathan had discussed children and agreed they wanted a family, but they were content to let nature take its course. The ranch school was, in many ways, Eliza's first child, a creation that demanded nurturing and attention, that filled her with pride as it grew and flourished. As their first wedding anniversary approached, Eliza found herself reflecting on how completely her life had transformed in a single year. From a frightened, injured woman lying beside an overturned wagon to a confident wife, teacher, and rancher, the journey seemed almost unbelievable. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't found me that day?" she asked Nathan as they lay in bed one night, the winter wind howling outside their snug home. Nathan propped himself up on one elbow, his expression serious in the lamplight. "I try not to. The thought of you out there alone." He shook his head. "Let's just say I thank God every day that I decided to take that route home." Eliza reached up to touch his face, tracing the beloved contours with gentle fingers. "So do I." New Year's Day of 1878 marked not only their first anniversary but the beginning of a new chapter. Eliza had suspected for several weeks, but on that morning, she was certain enough to share the news with Nathan. They exchanged gifts beside the fireplace, a new saddle from Nathan to Eliza, handcrafted to fit her perfectly, and from Eliza to Nathan, a finely bound journal for recording the ranch's business. But the real gift came afterward. "There's something else," Eliza said, taking Nathan's hand and placing it against her still flat stomach. "Something that won't arrive until summer." Nathan's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Eliza, are you saying?" She nodded, her eyes filling with happy tears. "We're going to have a baby." The joy that transformed Nathan's face was something Eliza knew she would remember all her days. He gathered her into his arms with a whoop of delight, then immediately released her, suddenly concerned. "Did I hurt you? Should you be resting?" "Do we need to call the doctor?" Eliza laughed, pulling him back to her. "I'm pregnant, Nathan, not made of glass. Dr. Patterson already knows I saw him last week when I was in town. Everything is fine." They spent the rest of that anniversary day planning and dreaming, Nathan alternately elated and protective. By evening, he had already begun sketching ideas for a cradle he would build himself. The news of Eliza's pregnancy spread quickly, bringing well wishes from friends and neighbors. Her students at the ranch school were particularly excited, offering name suggestions and asking endless questions about the baby. "Will school close when the baby comes?" asked 12-year-old Thomas Parker, the oldest of her students and the most serious about his education. "Only for a short time," Eliza assured him. "My sister-in-law Rebecca will be coming from Denver to help, and she's agreed to continue lessons while I recover." As her pregnancy progressed, Eliza found herself surrounded by support. The women from neighboring ranches brought gifts of hand-sewn baby clothes and practical advice. Mrs. Sullivan fussed over her diet, insisting on special tonics and extra portions at meals. And Nathan treated her like the most precious thing in his world, balancing his natural protectiveness with respect for her independence. "You don't need to check on me every hour," Eliza teased one afternoon when he appeared at the schoolhouse door for the third time that day. "We're just doing arithmetic." "I was passing by," Nathan claimed, though they both knew the pasture he was supposedly checking was in the opposite direction. Summer arrived with scorching heat that made Eliza's final months of pregnancy especially challenging. She had closed the school for the season, promising to reopen in the fall, and spent most of her days in the relative coolness of the house. Rebecca arrived from Denver in early July, bringing more baby gifts and welcome companionship. "Nathan is exactly like our father was when our mother was expecting me," Rebecca confided with a laugh. "Papa apparently followed her everywhere, convinced she needed his arm to navigate even the most basic tasks." "That sounds familiar," Eliza agreed, wincing as the baby delivered a particularly energetic kick. "Though I must admit, in this heat, I'm grateful for the excuse to rest." The baby, a boy they named William Nathan Blackburn, arrived on a sweltering August evening after a labor that left Eliza exhausted but triumphant. Dr. Patterson, who had ridden out from Lead at Nathan's urgent summons, pronounced both mother and child in excellent health. "He's perfect," Nathan whispered, cradling his son with tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "Eliza, he's absolutely perfect." Looking at her husband holding their child, Eliza felt a completeness she had never imagined possible. This was her family, a family she had created with the man who had once found her broken and alone, who had promised, "I've got you now," and kept that promise in every way that mattered. The years that followed brought more children: a daughter, Grace Elizabeth, born in 1880, and another son, James Thomas, who arrived in the spring of 1883. The Blackburn Ranch prospered and expanded, with Nathan's innovative breeding practices earning recognition throughout the territory. The ranch school continued as well, eventually growing large enough to require a proper schoolhouse and, in time, an additional teacher to assist Eliza. Life was not without its challenges. The winter of 1881 brought blizzards that threatened their cattle and tested their resilience. A drought in 1884 required difficult decisions and sacrifices. And there were personal trials too: a miscarriage between Grace and James that left Eliza depressed for months, illnesses that swept through the children, disagreements that every marriage must weather. But through it all, the foundation remained solid. Nathan and Eliza faced each challenge as partners, their love deepening with each passing year. The woman who had once sought independence above all else had found that true freedom came not from being alone, but from being truly understood and valued for exactly who she was. On a warm summer evening in 1896, nearly 20 years after that fateful wagon accident, Eliza sat on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching her children help Nathan with the evening chores. William, now 18 and the image of his father, was preparing to leave for college in the fall, the first Blackburn to pursue higher education. Grace, 16 and fiercely intelligent, had already announced her intention to become a doctor. And James, 13 and full of mischief, was currently engaged in a good-natured wrestling match with the family dog. Nathan came to join her on the porch, settling into the chair beside hers with the comfortable ease of long marriage. His hair was threaded with silver now, and the lines around his eyes had deepened, but to Eliza, he was as handsome as the day he had found her by that overturned wagon. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, taking her hand as they watched the sunset paint the sky in familiar glory. Eliza smiled, squeezing his fingers gently. "I was thinking about beginnings, about how sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best ones." Nathan nodded, understanding immediately. "That day I found you, I had no idea I was really finding my whole future." "Nor I," Eliza agreed softly. "I was so focused on getting to lead, on starting my teaching career, that I couldn't see any other path. If that wagon hadn't overturned, I would have found you anyway," Nathan said with quiet certainty. "Maybe at a town social or through the school board. Some things are meant to be, Eliza." She leaned over to kiss him, this man who had been her rescuer, her friend, her lover, her partner through 2 decades of joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge. "I believe you're right," she murmured against his lips. "Some things are simply meant to be." As darkness fell and their children's laughter echoed across the ranch yard, Eliza Blackburn knew that the journey that had begun with disaster had led her exactly where she was meant to be all along: home, in every sense of the word, with the man who had promised to hold her safe and had never let go.